Here's the next project. It's kind of hard to see, but it's this little hutch right here. This little cabinet that I built some years ago. It's kind of hard to tell the way it is. Let's get to it right away. Do the intro. You're watching On the Mark with Mark. This is a corner hutch that I built a number of years ago, and it's designed to be mounted into a corner. Now, at our old house, I actually had it mounted in a corner where there was a cupboard. Here's a picture of it. I actually screwed it in from the back side of the cupboard, so that made it real easy to mount. We've got a couple of different angles of it. We just loved how this worked out. This cabinet was built to match another cabinet that we have, one that my father-in-law made, which is right over here. Right here, and it fits in a corner. And I tried to match this crown molding as close as I could, but slightly scaled down because my cabinet is a little smaller, so it could match that way. The other thing that I wanted to do with my cabinet is to make the stiles and the rails as small as possible so that whatever is in the window, everything that's on the shelf can be seen really clearly through the window. So I'll show you how I made that. Now, I don't have video of it. I only have pictures. To start today, what we need to do, we need to get everything out of there. And then you can see on the back side, there's a little bit of a recess here. This is the side that goes against the wall. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mount a French cleat in here, and then we'll mount the other side of the French cleat on the wall, and then we'll be able to hang this up. We've only been in our new house for 6 years now, so maybe it's about time I got around to hanging that up there. Let's get this down to the shop and make the French cleat. There, isn't that neat? Opens like that. You can see how the bottom is up even with this style here. So whatever gets set on that shelf doesn't get hidden. There's only a little bit of hiding behind the side of the rail there. And the shelves come right out there. And of course you got glass on both sides there. And this is sanded in such a way that you can't get cut by it. I was real happy, you maybe can tell, I'm pretty proud of it. Real happy with how this turned out. The one thing I haven't done is made the mounting cleat for it yet. And that was originally in the design for it, but then the way it worked out at our old house, I had access behind the cabinet and I just ran some screws through the cabinet and mounted it to the cabinet. It wasn't really attached to the wall. But here it's gonna have to go on the wall, so I'm gonna finish it by adding that French cleat, and I'll make the mating part that gets mounted on the wall, and then we'll be able to hang this thing up, and my wife can put her teapots and her teacups in there, and it just makes a nice display. All a French cleat is you got a wall here, okay? So this is what we're gonna be mounting our shelf to. Now this is the shelf. It's sticking out here like this. But if you recall, the back side has a recess in it. So it comes down a little ways and then it goes in and goes like that. Okay, so there's a void right here. So this is all the shelf, and then out here, this is where the glass is, and then we can see the shelves in here, and nice and shiny glass. So in this void right here is where we're going to add 2 pieces of wood. And looking on edge, they're going to look like this. Now imagine you're looking at the end. There's the growth rings of the wood. Okay? So that is in between here. It's going to be across here like that. When this gets fully engaged, it ends up looking like that. So now here's our growth rings of the wood, and I'm going to grow them in a different direction here. So this part is attached here, and this part will be attached to the wall. So by having that angle right there, when we set this whole shelf up on that part that's attached to the wall, it will be hanging on this angled part, so it can't pull away from the wall, it can't go down. French cleat. Very simple method for hanging a shelf. This can hold a lot of weight. It's nothing new. I'm going to use that method on this little shelf. Here's the full-blown plan. Now I have this simple piece of wood here. This is what I'm going to use. This is just part of a cut-off of a 2x4. So each one is going to be 1.5 inches long, and then there's going to be an angle. That angle isn't real critical, you know, it shouldn't be 15 degrees, but anything between 30 and 45 will work here. I want them to be 9/16 of an inch wide, because that's how big the gap is that's behind the shelf itself. And then one of them is going to be 6.5 inches long, and the other one's going to be 6. The one that's mounted to the cabinet is going to be 6.5, and it's going to get pocket hole screwed and glued to that void in back of the shelf, so it's going to be attached very well. This is the one that's going to get attached to the wall, and that's going to get attached, I'm pretty sure there's no studs there, so it's just going to get attached with some drywall anchors, which, boy, that really makes me nervous. I may have to go molly bolts with that. But anyway, I want that to be shorter so that I don't have to be so exactly accurate where it ends up on the wall, so that, you know, it's not in the wrong place and the thing doesn't fit on there. So I'm giving myself a little bit of tolerance there. Maybe I should allow a little more. I should be able to hit it within 1/2 inch. So that's the plan. Now we can start cutting. We're going to put some pocket holes on either side of this part of the French cleat so that I can screw into the sides of the cabinet, and I'll add glue here and here too, but I like that mechanical fastener in there too. I have this tool right here. Now, I recently became a grandfather, and one of the things I remember about my own grandfather is he had tools I never saw anyplace else. And since I'm a grandfather now, I have one of these tools. This tool is no longer made. What this does, if you look, this has got a router bit on it. It goes in and it'll cut that pocket joint right in there for me. And then It's got a hole on this side here, and then you run a screw through. The beauty of this type of a pocket hole is when you run the screw down into that pocket, it actually straightens out and goes in parallel with the face. Now, this is an expensive tool. It's actually a router that's fixed to this base here, and it's got a bunch of adjustments to it. And then Craig came out with their pocket hole cutter, which was just a clamp. You hook this drill bit onto any drill, and you drill a hole into it, and it works beautiful for probably a 20th of the cost of this thing. So sales on this just fell through the floor. But actually, my dad had bought this, and he gave it to me, and he went and bought one of those Craig units. So he even decided it was better to use. But I think this thing is really neat, so I'm gonna keep using it. So let me get it set up here, and I'll show you how it works. I've got it ready now, so let's look close at this thing. Now this is the lever that clamps the wood down. I'm gonna pull my piece of wood out here. I've got these two backstops set up so that when I cut this hole, it's up against that side, and when I cut the other hole, it's up against the other side. Now, if you look down through there, see there's that hole right there. And what this is gonna do, comes down and it routers out a groove lined up perfectly with that hole. And then from this side, here's where the hole is. We'll take the drill bit and we'll put a hole right through there, and then we'll be set. It took me a while to get it set up just now, but probably not more than 5 minutes. But you gotta first adjust how high this is depending on your thickness of wood, and somehow I never seem to have the same thickness that I did last time. Then you adjust the height of where the hole's gonna be, and then you adjust where these are gonna be, and then you gotta adjust the depth of the router bit there. So it's a complicated item. If I had a whole bunch of these pocket holes to cut, it would be great. You could set it up once and man, you could really bang out a lot of holes. But we're just gonna do 2 here, so let's get to it. Get it in there like that. There's one side. There we go. That's better. Okay. So there are the 2 holes. Looks like it slid a little bit in there. My clamp isn't quite small enough to clamp this thin of wood. I should have thrown a spacer in underneath. Anyway, we are ready to go. Now I've got these screws, and these screws have a flat, I don't know if you call that the head, but it's not fluted where that goes in there. And then that bottoms out real good in the bottom of that hole. And I'm careful that these aren't gonna go like splitting through the front of my cabinet here. And I'm gonna keep this near the top, but not all the way to the top. But first, well, it went in a little bit crooked, but I'll be able to match that same crooked when I go to put this on the wall. Okay, now that I got the French cleat installed here, I'm gonna let this dry overnight, and then I'll put it on the wall tomorrow sometime. So let's take a look at the construction of this cabinet here. I took a lot of pictures of it. It's before I had a phone that had video capability when I made this, and it's kind of hard for me to even guess exactly when I did make it, but it's safe to say it was over 10 years ago. But I did take a lot of pictures of it while it was under construction, while I was building it, and then I used to take the pictures into work with me and show them to people. And my friend Adam kept encouraging me, Mark, you should start a YouTube channel. The way you photograph and document things, you're already doing half of the work. And it was only 10 years later that I finally took him up on that advice. He's one of my favorite subscribers, and a very early subscriber too, so I always look forward to seeing his comments. But we're going to go through those pictures, and I'll show you how I went about building this thing. It's kind of an interesting little bit of construction there. There were some challenges that had to be met, and also you saw some of the design criteria. I really wanted things to be visible in this cabinet. Let's look at these photographs. So this is where we're going to start. It's kind of at the finish. This is how the cabinet looked when it was mounted at our old house. So very cute looking here. But here is the plans that I had, and I just had this one sketch that I made. This had all the dimensions and the ideas that I needed in order to be able to put this together. So to start with, I made your basic frame with a lap joint. That's some nice pine there. It's good and clear, but I got a nice strong joint there by getting so much overlap on it. So there it is. And now that I got that good and square, then I can cut my 45s into the sides of the top and bottom of it and get it with the bend in it. This is the groove that I routed in so that there was a place for the glass to fit in. We got that all around. Okay, now the 45's been cut in it, and I've got it clamped up here. There's a small piece of wood cut in the corner, kind of acting as a gusset to help beef up this corner a little bit. Then there's a larger piece in the back that's not glued on. It's only there to help me be able to clamp this at a true 90-degree angle. So plenty of clamps on this thing. That's the way it was all clamped up. And now we got the clamps off, got the pile of clamps off to the side there, and that makes up the majority of the door right there. 90 degrees in. Now this is the back, and I approached this the same way. I started off with a flat piece, and I wanted it to be light, so I didn't want this to be solid. So there's a very small piece. This is probably 1/4 inch plywood laid in the back, and that's what's allowed me to be able to put that French cleat in now that I'm working on currently. So here it is, and there I got the 45 cut in it, and I like using these plate joints. It really helps line things up, especially with a 45-degree glue up, because those like to slip off in either direction real bad. So by putting that plate joint in there, that really keys it together, makes it so that it has to stay in the right place. And this is a good trick that I learned from a magazine here. You put a piece of painter's tape on the inside corner when you're doing a glue up like this. So I got plenty of glue in there, and you can see where it has squeezed out there. See that? But now it's on the tape, so I'll be able to clean that up real easily. So that is a sweet way to go there. See, I pulled that off there because I didn't want that glue in there. I didn't even want it on the wood ever. And I'm using my 90-degree blocks again to clamp this up. And the reason the corner's knocked out of that is because I didn't want it to possibly get caught in some glue down in the corner. So another fairly extensive glue up there. Bunch of clamps, and there it is now put together. I knocked off the back corner because the inside corners of walls in houses are always filled with mud. They're never a sharp corner. So if this was a sharp corner, which is what it was, that would only hold this cabinet away from the wall and make it look like it
right. A couple of more shots of it. Nice panel on the back there. And now I'm putting the shelves together. And of course, we've seen this already finished. So it's going to have these blonde shelves on it, even though the majority of the cabinet is painted white. This is some nice clear maple. And again, I'm using some plate joints to put these together. So here's another shot of it. It looks like I got it too low, but this is going to have that piece of crown molding across the top so that it matches our other cabinet that we had in our kitchen and now is in my wife's tea room. So here is the plate joints, and I had to make those out of 3 pieces of wood in order to get the size that I needed. And also, by making those out of multiple different pieces of wood like that, it actually makes for a more stable shelf, because if it started to want to warp, it's possible that the joining board will prevent it. Now that's the 3 shelves there in maple, and then these 2 pine pieces, those are going to be the top and the bottoms of the cabinet, and those get painted white, so those didn't need to be maple. Again with the tape where I don't want glue squeezing out anywhere. Now I've got the top and the bottom in. This is before I knocked the corner off of this bottom part of the cabinet so that the block, the gusset that I have on the door had room to be able to get the door to go shut. So now that's cut out of there. There you can see where I nipped the corner off. And that is also occurring at the top too. And now I've done some little bit of chisel work there. I've got the hinge laid in. And the door is actually swinging open. A little bit of interference. This is at the bottom. You can see down here, this is where I've nipped the corner off, but I don't want this shelf to look like it has the corner knocked off of it. So I'm going to have to do something with like half of this shelf here. But at this point, I hadn't figured out how I would do that yet. But this is the blonde shelf in there. This also brings up whatever sits on this shelf up even with the glass, so that you can see the whole item that's on that shelf. It's not hidden by part of this rail on the door frame. And those are the other 2 shelves. Just looking at the top, a little hole there. So I used that corner that I nipped off the shelf and then just glued it in just to plug that hole. And there you can see a little bit of it showing up right there. So it gives it a much more complete look. Now I've got the glass in there. But right now it's just 2 pieces of glass that are cut and fit in there. But you can kind of make out that that glass is sharp on the edges. And I needed to be able to make it so that the glass could be cleaned, or you can touch this thing without getting yourself cut. You can see how sharp that edge is right now. So I laid some emery cloth on this is the catcher table for my table saw. And what this is made out of is a piece of solid core door. It's actually an institutional door. It came out of a grade school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Very thick, heavy door, and it's just flat as can be. So just by laying that piece of emery cloth on there, and then I'm squirting this crud here, that's actually water. There's just water on that. I don't know if I was using the 409 or not. I taped up the edges of the glass because I didn't want to get cut by it. But by sanding that, I'm making it very flat and straight, and then I'll lean the glass over a little bit and just knock off the corners and put a slight radius on it so that it doesn't cut anybody. There you can kind of see, that's a little blurry, but it's got a decent corner on it now that you can touch without getting yourself cut. So now I'm going to glue these two pieces together, and in the past I've helped repair some fish aquariums, so I know that silicone actually glues onto glass pretty good, so that's what I'm using. But I didn't want the silicone squishing out all over the place. I wanted it to only be on the surfaces where the two pieces of glass touch. So I taped it all up like this, so anything that should happen to ooze out into other places, I would be able to pull the tape off and get that silicone off there right away. Then you can see I got these pieces of stone set up here. They've got a nice 90-degree to them, and then I'm just holding this all together while it sets up overnight. And there it is in place. While I was putting that in, it actually had a little bit of flex to it, because silicone is kind of a rubber. So it was very forgiving as I, wasn't super careful with it. It wasn't like a hard glue where if you bent it too much, it would snap loose. It was still quite flexible. So it looks real neat. That's exactly the look I was going for. I just wanted glass right up to a mitered corner like that, so there's nothing to obstruct your view. Imagine if there was a stile going down the middle of that. It would be right in the middle, in the way. So here's my plan, and if you look up here at the top, you can see this is calling for a fairly extensive crown molding. And the only reason for that is there's a matching cabinet that my wife has her teapots in, and I wanted to duplicate the crown mold that was on that other cabinet, only slightly scaled down because this piece of furniture is just a little bit smaller. So here's the pieces that I'm going to use to make that crown molding. What could possibly go wrong here? And I got my molding head cutter out here. So this is a little bit like a router. It's just got 3 blades in the table saw, and I've got, I don't know, probably 20 different shapes that I can put into this molding head cutter to make different profiles. And you can see a couple of the profiles right here. And there I'm cutting one, and I've got this sacrificial fence in my table saw so that I just can expose the part of the cutter that I want to use. And there's my pieces all stacked up here. So this is going to make for a real nice crown mold. Got it all glued up there. There's a couple of different kinds of wood there. I'm not quite sure what they all are. I know there's pine. I think that small piece, that might actually be fir. And I'm not sure what this other one in here might be yellow pine. Glued up real nice. I'm real happy with the look of that crown mold there. What's going on there? I just got it clamped on now to get a good fit on it, and wait a minute. Yeah, right there. So turns out it's not the inside measurement you need. You got to add the width of the widest part of the crown mold to the length twice, and then you can get it. So that's kind of how that went. So that turned into scrap wood. So we're going to leave it right there. Now let's see how our glued up cabinet with the French cleat is going right now.
We're going to hold up right there for now. And it's been overnight now, and this has had plenty of time to dry. And of course, here's my other part of the French cleat. And I have these toggle bolts that are going to go into the wall, and what they do is they go through the drywall and then they come out and then you tighten it down. So I think that'll be good for this fairly heavy cabinet to be hanging on the drywall. It's not, there is no stud there. I won't be able to hit the stud with this small little piece of wood. So that's going to be right under there. That's what's going to hold it up. But we're going to get to that next week. So please hit that subscribe button and you won't meet the exciting conclusion to getting this cabinet hung on the wall. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Good, good, good.